Hey everyone, welcome to the Friday, August 1st, 2025 episode of On Iowa Politics. This week on the podcast, Chuck Grassley catches bipartisan heat on judicial nominations, Iowa Republicans take on Rob Sand, and the messaging battle over the One Big Beautiful Bill continues. Hello everyone, I'm Erin Murphy, the Des Moines Bureau Chief for the Gazette in Cedar Rapids. We got the whole gang with us this week, each of us grasping for air as we deal with the wildfire smoke out there. Gazette Deputy Bureau Chief Tom Barton is with us. Hello, Tom.
Doing the bull dance, Erin. Feeling the flow.
Have you seen it yet?
Yeah, I have.
Is it good?
It's if you enjoyed the original movie, you'll like the second. It's a lot of callbacks and cameos, but it's still enjoyable.
All right, we're talking about the Happy Gilmore sequel there for the uninitiated. Lead Des Moines Bureau Chief Maya Marchel is with us. Hello, Maya.
We traded the corn sweat for wildfire smoke, Erin.
I know, right?
Not happy.
One health hazard for another. Sarah Watson of the Quad City Times is here. Hello, Sarah.
I got an email that was one of those marketing pitches talking about corn sweat leads to swamp butt. That was a real email I got this week.
That's important health news. I had no idea that they were connected.
If you might not know this if you're not a journalist, there are like a million companies that just send the worst ideas you've ever heard to write about, and they do this all day long. And I don't know how that's a lucrative business, but that they do it.
Yeah, good work if you can get it right. There does not seem to be a bar for a ridiculous level that they need to clear to send these story pitches. Some of them. That voice you just heard was Jared McNett of the Sioux City Journal. Welcome, Jared.
Good afternoon, Erin.
We have both of our Gazette columnists with us today as well. First, Althea Cole is here. Hello, Althea.
Hello, and no, I am never, ever, ever going to write a column about something called swamp butt, no matter how tempting it is. Thank you.
No, I think we all appreciate that. And finally, Gazette columnist Todd Dorman. Hello, Todd.
Hello, and I'm wondering, if I were just to set a couple racks of ribs outside, do you think that they would smoke adequately? Or isn't just not enough?
I think it's worth a shot. I'm not ruling it out.
All the worlds of barbecue today, which is
talk about making lemonade out of lemons, huh? We got health hazards.
Maybe we could ask the Canadians to burn some more hickory or apple wood or something. You can get that stuff on fire.
Here goes my mic. It's just got to be the right kind of wood, then it wouldn't be such a problem. Let's get rolling here. We got darn near enough content to do just a Chuck Grassley podcast this week, so we're going to start there. Assume other topics dead. Iowa's longtime Republican U.S. Senator and the chairman of the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee has been taking some heat from both political directions over judicial nominations. We're going to go in chronological order here, and the first flare-up was over Grassley's handling of the nomination of Emil Boove, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that horribly, a top official at the U.S. Department of Justice and one of Trump's former personal defense attorneys. Grassley shut down debate on Bowles' nomination to a lifetime appointment to the Third U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals before Democrats were permitted to speak on the nomination. Democrats on the committee responded to that by walking out of the committee before the vote. Maya, you were on a conference call with Grassley. He does these periodically with Iowa reporters, and he addressed this. What did the senator have to say about that particular instance?
Yeah. So first of all, just about the hearing, he denounced the concerns from Democrats. On the conference call, I asked specifically about them walking out of that meeting. And he said that, he informed the committee members ahead of the meeting that they were on a tight timeline because some members had scheduling conflicts after. So he didn't want them to miss the vote. And so he said, quote, "It wasn't that I didn't want to hear what they had to say about it because I told them ahead of time that after we vote, if people didn't speak or get a chance to speak ahead of time, I'd stay around, listen to them as long as they wanted to. They didn't have to stay around, so I didn't have to listen to them." That was his explanation on the press call. He also kind of added that There was precedent for what he did by kind of cutting off debate. He pointed to former committee chair, Democratic U.S. Senator Dick Durbin of Illinois, who Grassley said had cut off Republican debate on panels in charge of nominating Biden appointees when Democrats had control of the Senate. I believe Boove, I'm probably butchering that too. I believe he was confirmed earlier this week. But when I spoke to Grassley, he had been initially pushed through the initial stages for the Senate vote. He also kind of addressed some of the whistleblower complaints that Democrats had also brought up about Boove. They said that there were concerns about his actions he took in his leadership roles in the DOJ. Just to kind of go back, Boove was President Donald Trump's former personal defense attorney, but they said that, he took actions in his leadership roles at the DOJ, including allegations from whistleblowers, claiming that he suggested the department should ignore some court orders. And he, Boove has denied these claims. That's just kind of where that at. And then on those whistleblower complaints, Grassley said that his staff investigated them. They addressed them, and that he said that, they determined the claims were meritless following the investigation. That's where he was at with that.
I believe it is Emil Boove.
I appreciate that. I wondered if that was the case. I'm still not used to. This is a blind spot for me. Still, I'm still not used to being a multimedia journalist. I still lean on the old print clutch if I have to know how to spell it, but I don't have to worry about how to pronounce it. I need to get past that. Todd, I wanted to bring you in because you also wrote about this topic this week in one of your columns. Give us some highlights of your thoughts on what you wrote about Senator Grassley, and then I don't know if you had heard his defense, his talk about it yet when you wrote that column, or maybe what you think now that you heard that from Maya.
Yeah, I don't feel much different. I mean, I'm certainly glad that his staff investigated those whistleblower claims. That makes me feel a lot better that they were properly vetted, and no stone was left unturned, I guess is what I would say.
I have a tab open here that's it says sarcasm meter on it, and I feel it feels like it's getting a little wavy here.
Oh,
Todd.
no. I'm always genuine. I mean, I'm not into the sarcasm. I haven't even heard of it.
Yeah, it just broke. It's gone.
But Monsieur Boove, I thought it's pretty lousy nominee. Okay, I'll stop. Nominee. And you had these whistleblowers who, made various claims against Bouvet's running of his department, or his doing his job in the Justice Department. And, Chuck is supposed to be the friend of the whistleblower, but he's only a friend of the whistleblower if the whistleblower isn't going to make a Republican judicial appointment or a Republican politician or anything like that, if it's going to make them look bad. So sort of the whistleblower, sort of the image that he's painted of himself is kind of, he protects the whistleblower. In this case, he didn't think their allegations were even serious enough to hear them, which gives someone a lifetime judicial appointment on appeals court. It would seem like it would be a good idea to at least talk about this stuff that was found, that was being the allegations by these whistleblowers. But otherwise, did he break the committee rules? Yeah, I don't know how much people care about that. I mean, when you're in the majority, one of the things you have to do is sort of listen to the minority, take up some time and to hear their side before you just roll over them. It's just kind of the politeness of government, is just you allow people to make their points and then crush them with a final vote. I wrote, mainly also that a lot of Iowans have looked at what Chuck has done in recent years and wondered whatever happened to good old mavericky, independently minded, lawn mowing Chuck Grassley. And truth is, nothing happened. He's a powerful politician, and he made a power play to get a judge nominee through the committee, and all the rest of that stuff is sort of campaign imagery that we've seen him use effectively every time he runs again. Which, is he going to run again? I don't know. He'd be over 100 when he was done, but that's a whole other podcast.
Yeah, that's a whole other podcast episode.
Because I was trying to remember what this was even related to with him. This was all in relation to the Eric Adams case, right? His handling of that.
That was part of it.
Yeah, that's what the part of the whistleblower concerns are about. Because it basically seemed like Eric Adams was getting a lot of money from Turkey in particular, if I remember correctly. And then those charges went away after Trump got reelected.
Huh. Well, and it was also that he apparently told some Justice Department staffers that if a court tries to stop their deportation actions, tell the court to F off, basically. So you don't always want someone on a court to be a judge when they have contempt for the courts. But, everything's different now. So just roll with the changes.
All right. So that was Senator Grassley getting sideways with Democrats. Later in the week, he found himself in Republican President Donald Trump's sights on his social media site, Truth Social, also over judicial nominations. And I've written about this for us this week, so I'll give you the skinny as quickly as I can here. And this is going to start to sound like a civics lesson, so I apologize for that. But there is a quiz at the end, so take good notes. So on Tuesday, Trump wrote a long post saying Grassley should end the blue slip process that has been a part of judicial nominations in the U.S. Senate for decades. Under this process, Senate leaders will only advance a judicial nominee if both senators from the nominee's home state approve, regardless of whether they're in the majority or minority party in the Senate at the time. In his post, Trump, first, of course, Trump took credit for Grassley's most recent re-election victory. So he's to credit for both Chuck Grassley and Kim Reynolds now. But then Trump called the blue slip process a problem that is slowing the appointment of, quote, and capitalized, high qualified judges and U.S. attorneys. Trump went on to call the blue slip process probably unconstitutional and accused Democrats of not honoring the process on a couple of occasions when they had the Senate majority under Joe Biden. This judicial tit for tat goes back even further to Trump's first term, when Grassley and Lindsey Graham ended the blue slip process for circuit court judges, but maintained it for district court nominations. Now that I've put everyone to sleep, Althea, bring them back here. What's how uncomfortable is Senator Grassley's chairman's chair this week? It seems like he's, like I said, he's getting it from both sides. He's stood his ground in both cases.
For that reason, I don't think it's actually as uncomfortable as it might otherwise seem, because to your point, he's taken it from both sides, and he's done that before. First thing that popped into my head when you asked the question, how uncomfortable is his chairman's chair? I kid you not, the first thing that popped into my head was this memory of a day from my past life in politics. It was August 1st, 2016, exactly 6 months after the Iowa caucuses of 2016, and that's relevant for just a second here. In a group of, I think, no more than 10 of us, were given the opportunity to sit down in the back room of a pizza ranch, of course, with Mrs. Grassley. They were taking her on this little tour of the state to go meet with some, very valued volunteers and activists and supporters and whatnot. The group of us were having a nice chat. She's a clever, funny lady. And at one point when the caucus came up, she said, "And I told my children that if any of them voted for Ted Cruz, I would write them out of my will." And of course, that got some reaction from the group. Now, I supported in the 2016 caucus neither Ted Cruz nor Donald Trump. So I'm sitting there thinking this is totally worth the 2 hours on a Monday. That and the chicken at the pizza ranch, of course, because no respectable person eats pizza at the pizza ranch. But she gave this interesting reason. He gives Chuck such fits on the Judiciary Committee. So I don't think it's anything that Chuck Grassley is not used to on the Republican side. And of course, on the Democrat side, he's dealt with it too. After Trump was elected, you had Cory Booker doing all of his grandstanding and literally saying, I guess this is my Spartacus moment. And I don't know what that was all about. I think Chuck Grassley actually knew Spartacus back in the day and says, no, you're no Spartacus. But now he's got it from Donald Trump. And that's where I start to giggle. Because if you look back at the history, even before Trump's first term, Chuck has really taken it under the chin to pave a path for Trump to have some pretty good judicial nominations here. We've got the spring of 2016 when Justice Antonin Scalia very suddenly passed away, and then President Obama nominated Merrick Garland to take over the seat. Chuck Grassley was a big part of stopping Merrick Garland's appointment to the United States Supreme Court. Now, Joe Biden didn't help with the legitimacy of that after Trump's first term by nominating and getting Garland appointed to a highly partisan position that was the DOJ head. But still, it's like, come on. So basically, I don't know if it was bad advice that Trump got. I would put it more likely as just Trump doing a Trump being Trump, which is, he's going to shoot his mouth off. Now, does that permanently alter a relationship for the worse? You got to remember, Donald Trump is also a president who once called Marco Rubio Little Marco and had, a couple battles with him in the 2016 primary. And now Marco Rubio is his Secretary of State, and the two have a great relationship. And Trump is just all sorts of excited about what Rubio is accomplishing. And then you got this guy who wrote a memoir about his childhood growing up in a hillbilly family, who wrote a foreword for a future edition of that book that literally says, I didn't vote for Donald Trump, and I don't think he's the right solution for our country. And that guy
called him Hitler. he said it's America's Hitler.
And he is now Trump's vice president, and the two have a great relationship, totally supportive of one another. So does this mean that the honeymoon is totally over for Big Orange and Chuck Grassley? Absolutely not. But at the same time, Trump works best with advisors who are going to tell him, who are brave enough to tell him what they think and how it really is, without worrying about whether or not he's going to hold it against them for the rest of time. And if I were one of those advisors, I'd be like, hey, Mr. President, shut the hell up. Respectfully, sir, shut up. This is Chuck Grassley you're talking about.
That's interesting you say that, because I was reading some follow-up national coverage today, and that's effectively what some Republican senators are saying, not directly to the president, obviously, but behind closed doors, they seem to be rallying around Senator Grassley and Senator Tom Tillis, who's has now the freedom of not running for re-election and has spoken a little more freely, said that he thinks that I think maybe to your point is that the president is getting bad advice from his team right now on this, and that he wishes that he'd back off Senator Grassley on this. So.
Or it could be just a situation of no advice. Because again, Trump gonna Trump. And when you've got a smartphone and Truth Social or the Twitter or the Facebook or anything like that, not only do you not need a team of advisors, you don't have a team of advisors standing between you and your cell phone. I mean, I remember Trump saying once that he would show stuff to Melania that he was about to tweet out, and Melania would be like, don't tweet that. And then boop, he'd put it right on the Twitter. So, I mean, yeah, I think this is just kind of an off the cuff thing. We don't know how freely Grassley can speak because we're not certain that he's not running for re-election. We haven't heard anything from him. So, but I don't think it's the end of the honeymoon. I'm predicting that Clarence Thomas will retire probably next summer. And, that way, President Trump can nominate Brenna Bird to fill his seat on the Supreme Court. And he's going to need some help from Chuck Grassley to do that. So we'll see what lies ahead. But no, the relationship is not over.
To use a baseball term, there's another game tomorrow always, right? Yep.
I would maybe reckon, too, that the blue slip process is not something that Trump is going to stay focused on for too much longer. Because
I was going to ask that, yeah.
There's sort of other big stuff that he's been trying to kind of put a lid on for the past few weeks that has still kind of been under his skin. So I don't really know that he's going to focus as much brain power on blue slips.
Well, and to the point of the blue slips, you love them when it's your people in charge. Or excuse me, I mean, when you've got the power, great. But when it's another president in charge and they're nominating people that you don't like and you don't want to see on the court, all of a sudden those blue slips become pretty important in red states when it's a blue president and vice versa. So I kind of worded that a little bit verbosely, but you know what I'm saying. Blue slips are something that you love them when you love them and you hate them when they work against you. But that's a lot of different political policies. And, you know, the filibuster itself, getting rid of that 60 vote threshold, Democrats did that in 2013 under Harry Reid so that they could get some Obama nominees through. Mitch McConnell came out of his shell and said, be careful what you wish for, and then used that quite a bit in Trump's first term, including to get Neil Gorsuch confirmed, So yeah, careful what you wish for now.
So is that the word on the street that Trump wants to nominate Brenna Byrd as a Supreme Court justice?
Oh, I was just saying that to rile people because that's what I do.
All right. Let's bring the show back to Iowa now and put the spotlight on the state's 2026 open seat gubernatorial election, which does not include Brenna Byrd. We learned a month or so ago now. The Republican Party of Iowa held a fundraiser late last week in North Iowa, and the event featured many of the top names in Iowa GOP politics speaking, including retiring Governor Kim Reynolds, who's announced she's not going to run for re-election, former Governor Terry Branstad, and state party co-chairs Jeff Kaufman and Linda Upmeyer. And the target of their talks, a lot of it was about Democratic candidate for governor and current state auditor Rob Sand. Maya covered the event for our team. Maya, what was kind of the general theme of Iowa Republicans' message about Rob Sand?
First of all, these folks were all headlining a Republican fundraiser in Clear Lake last Friday. And, the reason why this was kind of the lead of the story was because almost unprompted by all of them, every single one of them had something to say about Rob Sand, either, warning that he is a threat to the governor's office. He's really bad for Iowa. He's a Democrat, kind of, he's a wolf in sheep's clothing. He's kind of marketing himself as a bipartisan or a moderate, but they said he's more of a far left candidate. Unprompted by all of them, less than 15 minutes into the evening, which was full of, it was a fundraiser. So it featured U.S. Senator Chuck Grassley and former Iowa Governor Terry Branstad. They were reminiscing about their whole political careers, how they got to where they are, what it's like to be lawmakers, and just sharing kind of stories like that. But Sand's name came up out of everyone's mouth multiple times. And so the person that really kind of started to fire it up was Republican Party of Iowa chairman Jeff Kaufman, who said that Sand is, quote, "He will unravel everything. Do not be drugged in by his hypocritical social media crap. That is what I ask of you. Watch him like a hawk, and he's going to be good enough at the spin in order to try to carry it off." So Sand, who is the only statewide Democrat in Iowa, he is also the auditor running for governor. He has launched a town hall series across the state. And in those town halls, I attended the first one, but also learned this through reporting from across the state, that he's been kind of marketing himself as someone who doesn't love party labels. He said, in terms of picking the Democratic label, he picked his poison there in terms of having to pick a party. He's really branding himself as this moderate candidate that is kind of trying to draw in voters from both sides of the aisle. And that's been apparent in his town halls. But Kaufman said, be aware, he's not moderate as he's branding himself. He's a far left candidate. He brought AOC's name in and said, he's just as far left as AOC, but he's worse because, and I'm paraphrasing here, but at least AOC shows how far left she is. Sand is kind of hiding it. Don't be fooled by the fact that he says he bow hunts and he goes to church and fishes and stuff like that, which Sand does bring up quite frequently, especially in his town halls. So just thought that was interesting. 15 months out from the election and at this Republican fundraiser, every top Republican, including Reynolds, said, don't be fooled by this guy. So not a fan of him there.
Yeah, and interesting to your point. I mean, it's obvious in one sense because it's the top of the ticket race here next year, and Sand is the presumed front runner in the Democratic nomination there. But also interesting because there is a U.S. Senate race next year too, and they didn't feel the need to pile on Zach Walz and Nate Sage and that gang. Rob Sand is the target for now. And he can. Sorry, go ahead, Jay.
I would note because I think I've mentioned before, one of the many hats that I get to wear is our online editor. So I get to monitor all our Facebook comments, and there were actually some pretty interesting comments on your Rob Sand story, Maya, on our Facebook page. We had a couple of regulars say, one in particular said directly, "I'm tired of this right-left Republican Democrat crap." So that was interesting. And then we had a couple of people who are also regulars who identify as Republicans saying that they're open to voting for Rob Sand. And then the Rob Sand for Iowa account was like responding directly to people in like the Facebook comments. So whoever is running that account is really monitoring Facebook comments pretty closely.
Wow.
So just a couple of things from that I found pretty interesting.
That is wild. Well, and Jared, let's stay with you here because Rob Sand came to Northwest Iowa there as part of his 100 event / 99 county tour of the state, and the Sioux City Journal covered it. I don't believe it was you; it was a colleague. Is that
no? We put our intern to work. He got to go cover a political event on Monday.
What was the messaging similar to what Maya described that the Jeff Kaufman was warning about?
Oh yeah, because Maya, in your story, there was a comment from, was it Emma O'Brien? Is that one of Rob Sand's people
Yes.
talking about the where Iowa ranks in terms of like economic growth and personal income growth, and then cancer rates? And he used that exact same quote himself during the event in Sioux City. So staying on message as far as that goes. And he also had the pick your poison thing. And he had the what is it? It's not about redder or bluer. It's about righter and truer. Is that the slogan? So that one got busted out too. So yeah, staying pretty on message. The event was at the IBEW local 231 that he was at. So still important to hit up the union events when you're in Sioux City. And yeah, he only spoke for about 20 minutes and then took 40 minutes of questions, is what Eric said in his story. And it was a wide range of stuff. Talked about abortion, clean water, a few other things. And then, yeah, like I said, really stayed on message with the where Iowa has kind of fallen in the rankings over the years since Republicans have had the trifecta.
Yeah, Jim. Yeah. Was there any sense of the kind of crowd that was there? And since that was the Journal's intern, he wouldn't have as much as the historical knowledge there, but was there any way to tell? Is it typical Democratic event people? Was it any kind of mix? Or
it seemed like some of the typical people that show up to any Democratic events were there, just based on what I saw from who was like kind of sharing the story and talking about it on Facebook. And he drew a pretty good sized crowd. The room was pretty well full. Okay. So yeah.
All right. Well, speaking of campaigning, as we noted last week on the podcast, Iowa Democratic U.S. Senate candidate J.D. Shelton has been out on the trail recently. We briefly talked about a stop of his last week in Cedar Rapids. That was followed shortly after by a visit to the Quad Cities, which our Sarah Watson covered. Sarah, what were some of the highlights from J.D. Shelton's Quad Cities tour stop?
Yeah, so he went to Grumpy's Saloon, which is a popular bar in the village of East Davenport. There were maybe like 20, 30 people there, mostly folks that were Democrats who are, on the Democrats emailing list. There was one person who said she was not really a Republican or Democrat, independent voter. And he, gave his spiel. He's a professional baseball player, talked about how he, started pitching again for the Sioux City Explorers and gave his story. and how he's, kind of taking these opportunities as they come up where, he jumped into pitching again because the Sioux City Explorers were desperate for a pitcher, and he's, jumping into the Senate race because he thinks that that Iowans need better representation. And he really emphasized, I think, wanting Democrats to be more trustworthy and authentic, and just bringing a more like populist argument to the campaign trail. So he had a beer, in his hand the whole time. He, was talking about baseball. A lot of his campaign seemed to be focused on universal health care and consumer protection against like really big corporations. He praised Lena Khan at her appointment as chair of the FTC. She was a real big antitrust voice in the Biden administration. And so some of those consumer protection policies, he thinks that Democrats should really champion, things like that. And just talking about consolidation like in the agriculture industry and how that's hurt Iowa's economy, and basically talking to how healthcare costs have increased and trying to speak to issues that just everyday people experience in their day-to-day lives. That's kind of it in a nutshell. He talked about water quality, he talked about agriculture and kind of business issues, like mid-sized business issues. There was a federal worker there who was concerned about layoffs and changes. And, he talked about how Doge was a mistake and didn't think that the cuts without thought was a good policy. And then somebody else who was a teacher brought up to Shelton how his sense is that a lot of people seem to think that the Democrats have this brand where Democrats spend without thought, and there's just this sense that the country's spending too much and we need to cut, and was wondering how he thought Democrats could message better on fiscal responsibility. And so then to that, JD Shelton's criticized like the education savings accounts and how those, are costing the state quite a bit of money, and talked about, he called the big beautiful bill the billionaire bailout bill. And so I think he's really focusing on trying to be more populist and, breaking up monopolies and talking about corporate consolidation and trying to be more that person you talk to at a bar.
Which he's stayed on message about that for years now. That sounds exactly like how he's been anytime I've talked to him for interviews, or even going back to like his 2018 campaign.
Yeah, the big ag consolidation stuff, especially. He's talked a ton about that. The universal healthcare, for some reason, I has he talked about that before? Has that been a long time policy stance of his? Or
it's come up in the past.
Okay.
Well, he's also got that "you're probably getting screwed" deal newsletter. I don't think it's a podcast, but I think he does some videos. So that's a lot of that stuff he talks about in that.
Yeah. Okay. And to the beer sipping thing, I just saw a video interview with the one Tom Barton where JD Shelton is literally sipping at a beer as he answers Tom's questions too. So that's clearly part of the campaign imagery.
By the way, since Sarah mentioned it, shout out to the Sioux City Explorers, #1 in the Western League of the American Association.
Oh, nice. So he's not throwing for just any old club out there.
Yeah, I'm sure this season he'd like to get his ERA down a little bit, but no, the team's doing pretty well.
Okay. Well, speaking of, Sarah mentioned this as part of this list of things that JD Shelton was talking about. We got a little taste in other areas of how congressional Republicans and Democrats are focusing their respective messaging on the big tax and spending package passed by congressional Republicans and signed into law by President Trump. Tom Barton covered some events this past week where on Tuesday, Eastern Iowa Congresswoman Ashley Henson held a roundtable discussion with bar and restaurant owners about the bill's elimination of taxes and tips on overtime. And then on Wednesday, Democrats highlighted the 60th anniversary of Medicaid by highlighting their support for the program and raising concerns about how it will operate under the deep spending cuts. So, Tom, it sounds like a little bit like you got a sneak peek of what some of the 2026 congressional campaign commercials will look like. Tell me what you saw and kind of the different approaches the two parties were taking this week.
Yeah. So with lawmakers back home in their districts for the months-long August recess, Republicans saw this as an opportunity to push back on the narrative that has been put out by Democrats, leading up to and after passage and signing of the big beautiful bill by President Trump. Leading up to passage of the bill and its signing, Republicans were really kind of on the back foot, playing defense, trying to defend their support for legislation, with Democrats attacking it as, again, a taxpayer bailout for billionaires, providing tax cuts to the wealthy at the expense of Americans who are relying on these safety net programs that Democrats argue are going to be, chiseled back under the bill, including Medicaid and SNAP food assistance. And so Ashley Henson on Tuesday, as you mentioned, had this roundtable discussion with bar and restaurant owners in Independence, trying to refocus on some of the more popular elements of the legislation that Republicans argue are going to be a benefit to working class Americans. And specifically, she focused on the provision, the no tax on tips and overtime, talking about how this will help put money back in Iowans' pockets, and talking about how, this will help small businesses potentially attract potential employees and aid in recruitment and retention. So some of the business owners there, talked about the difficulties that they have finding servers and bartenders, and finding people, willing to work for $10 to $15 an hour plus tips, when potentially they could earn more elsewhere. And so they talked about how they hope that the new tax provision will make positions in the service industry more desirable, and again, help them with some of the staffing issues that they're running into. What was interesting is that the roundtable came in the wake of a new memo from the National Republican Congressional Committee that was obtained and reported on by Politico, highlighting again this messaging battle ahead of the 2026 midterm. The memo directed members on, again, how to sell Trump's mega bill during Congress August recess. It urges GOP members, again, to focus on tax relief, immigration, and business reforms, and suggest holding these roundtables and visiting hospitals and restaurants and small businesses to highlight specific provisions of the bill. Again, Democrats arguing that the legislation prioritizes tax breaks for the wealthy and corporations while relying on spending cuts to programs like Medicaid and food assistance to offset the costs, and are already planning rallies in red states across the country. So that was on Tuesday. Wednesday, the following day, you had Iowa Democratic congressional candidate Christina Bohannon of Iowa City, who's running for a third time to try and unseat Republican incumbent Congresswoman Marionette Miller Meeks in Iowa's 1st Congressional District. Bohannon toured Washington County Hospital in clinics, and she also held and talked with the hospital CEO, Todd Patterson, who's been outspoken about the effects of the bill and what that could mean for both providers and patients, and discussed essentially the financial struggles that rural hospitals will likely face due to Medicaid spending reductions included in the bill, and just kind of the broader impact on healthcare access. Christina Bohannon talked about growing up in a mobile home in a rural town of 700 people in Florida, saying that she knows what it's like for rural families to lose healthcare.
When my dad got sick with emphysema, they canceled his health insurance, and we lost everything trying to pay for the health care and the prescription drugs that he needed to live.
And said that, she fears and she worries that will become more common as Medicaid, as that U.S. healthcare safety net for millions of low-income Americans is rolled back under that tax bill. Miller Meeks' office responded to that in a statement, arguing that as a physician, she knows full well how vital Medicaid is for Iowa's most vulnerable citizens, and why we have to protect it, and contends and argue that, through the One Big Beautiful Bill, Medicaid spending will still increase. It may not increase at the rate that is projected or was forecast by the Congressional Budget Office under kind of the status quo under existing conditions and laws, absent changes included under the One Big Beautiful Bill. But again, contends Medicaid spending is still going to increase over the next 10 years, and again, arguing that the changes are meant to cut waste, fraud, and abuse and ensure that only eligible individuals are going to receive benefits, reforms that Miller Meeks argues Democrats opposed, and said that it's irresponsible not to address the unsustained spending trajectory of Medicaid, which she argues, if unchecked, will outpace defense and interest payments on debt.
All right, the One Big Beautiful Debate continues. Real quick, as we sign off here, Tom, speaking of town halls, we should encourage, we're recording per usual Thursday afternoon. We should encourage readers to watch the Gazette on Friday to see if Congresswoman Marionette Miller Meeks is going to have a town hall in this recess, right?
Yeah. Stay tuned.
Big breaking news here. This just came over the transom just a little bit ago, kind of following up from the beginning of the podcast. Iowa's sweet corn on the cob voted America's 6th favorite summer dish, according to mixbook.com. That's mixbook.com. Iowa is America's 6th favorite summer dish, the corn on the cob.
Can I say something at the end? Is that okay?
Please do.
Yeah. Well, we got news today that Ben Sullivan, the longtime reporter at the Gazette, has died. He was 84 years old. He covered every presidential candidate between 1980 and 2000. He estimated in a farewell column that he had spent 1,500 nights in hotels, which he said added up to 4 years of his life. So,
wow.
He was a journalism legend, well known, and he's certainly going to be missed.
He was before my time, Todd. It was the James Lynch and Todd Beauchart show. By the time I came along, did you work with Mr. Sullivan?
I knew him. I reported on stuff that he was reporting on. I didn't work in the legislature when he was there, but I did go to his retirement party, so that must count.
There you go. Yeah, and you can, speaking of things you can watch for, we're gonna have a news obit in the Gazette on Friday about that as well. Thanks for bringing that up, Todd. All right, that's going to do it for this episode of On Iowa Politics. If you're not already, please subscribe to us on your streaming service of choice or on YouTube, where you can also smash that like button. You can find the podcast each and every week also on your preferred Gazette or lead newspaper website. Now that you've listened to the On Iowa Politics podcast, make sure you're also subscribed to the On Iowa Politics newsletter, where every morning in your inbox you'll receive all the latest politics and government coverage from our team. You can subscribe to that free newsletter at the Gazette's website, thegazette.com. And lastly, don't forget that the work of everyone you heard here today can be found on the pages and websites of the Quad City Times, Muscatine Journal, Cedar Rapids Gazette, Waterloo Cedar Falls Courier, Mason City Globe Gazette, Council Bluffs Daily Nonpareil, and the Sioux City Journal. I'm not saying that in my sleep yet, but I assume it's coming. For Tom Barton, Maya Marchel, Hoff, Sarah Watson, Jared McNett, Althea Cole, Todd Dorman, and our producer Bailey Sheehan, the whole fan family, I'm Erin Murphy. Be well, everyone, and be good.